My Hero Academia's Kai Chizaki, or Overhaul, is definitely the most polarizing villain in the MHA fandom. Initially, Overhaul was presented as a calm, intelligent, and charismatic villain with a cool gang of hardened thugs. However, at the turning point of the arc, the once experienced criminals started to act more like fodder for our heroes to squash, with Overhaul himself acting irrational and eccentric, shedding away any ominous presence he once had. Not only that, but Overhaul's grand plan for changing superhero society and taking away people's quirks started to directly contradict his later objective of wanting to repay the Yakuza boss. Readers like myself were really turned off by this development, as the character seemed to have done a complete 180 from what we thought we were initially promised. However, looking back on the character with full context has allowed me to piece together the connection between Overhaul's characterization, his compassion for the Yakuza boss, and his ideology towards quirks and heroes, all tying together to make Overhaul the most complex villain in MHA. He may not be my favorite antagonist of the series, but I can now see the insane amount of subtlety and nuance that went into writing this amazing character. If you would like to skip any specific topics, then go to the timestamps on screen or in the description, as this video is meant to be a thorough exploration of Chizaki to help those like me, fans who are either confused or disappointed upon their first experience, and would like to have a better understanding of Overhaul.
だから嫌だ。待てコンプレス。こいつらやべえ。俺の圧縮で閉じ込める。個性が発動できない。触るな。
First, I want to address the complaints people have about Overhaul's personality and how it seems to contradict how he acts later in the story. Early on, Overhaul is presented as competent and menacing. His presence along with his charismatic design creates a stark contrast to the series' main antagonist, Tomura Shigaraki. Just as well, his brutalization of the League of Villains presents him and his men as worthy of respect. However, I think author Kohei Horikoshi may have done too good of a job at selling Overhaul's cool factor, because viewers tend to forget, this scene also portrays Chizaki with the same eccentricities that he displays by the end of the arc. We see Overhaul freaking out over being touched, becoming too emotional which causes him to lose focus on fighting, and showing genuine terror at the sight of Shigaraki's attacks. Even his men arrive too late to protect him, and one misses a shot that could have led to Overhaul's death. Overhaul is not invincible, he is flawed, his psyche is fragile, and his men are shown to be nothing more than pawns ready to sacrifice themselves at a moment's notice. With this one scene, Horikoshi is showing us that his calm and cool persona is just one part of his personality. When the filth of the world interacts with him or he loses control of the situation, he becomes unhinged. But when he is in control, when he can leverage his overwhelming quirk, when he feels powerful, he can command a presence strong enough to lure a scared little girl back into his clutches. The duality of Overhaul was present since the beginning, and he is not any more or less powerful, eccentric, charismatic, intelligent, or arrogant than he is by the end of the story. Moving on, I want to briefly address a smaller concern about the presentation of Overhaul's character. Specifically, some may wonder, why is he so cruel? At first, it may appear as if Overhaul is just evil for the sake of itself, with little to no build-up or justification for his actions. Viewing Overhaul this way can give off the impression that he is hollow or two-dimensional, and is only acting the way he does for the sake of the plot, which can strain believability of the character. However, with all the pieces of Chizaki's story in mind, we'll find that there is ample setup for his behavior. Our first look at Chizaki as a child presents him with a blank expression, with the rest of his face obscured except for his cold, emotionless eyes. Sometime later, we see Chizaki at what looks to be a daycare, hunched over and hidden away reading medical books, while other children are playing and acting like kids, clearly showing the difference in personality and priorities even at such a young age. Possibly due to living on the streets for years and having very little human interaction, he is clearly antisocial and distant from other humans, similar to how he acts as an adult. On two separate occasions, Chizaki is described by both the boss and Chrono as someone who often goes too far with things. Once Chizaki is fixated on something, he cannot be stopped. Combined with the fact that his quirk is one that defies pain and death, rendering them both as momentary problems, it makes sense that someone like Chizaki would lack empathy for others. Nothing he does has consequences due to his quirk, which allows him to shape reality to his whim and to go as far as he wants. Without going into spoilers, later arcs will concretely confirm the connection between a person's personality and their quirk. In some ways, Chizaki was always going to become some semblance of what he is now due to his environment, his personality, and most importantly, his limitless quirk. And it's by seeing the way he's acted since he was a kid and comparing to how he acts now that we can see his foundation. With all that said, there is still some humanity buried deep within Chizaki, as he has one who he admires, respects, and dare I say, loves.
すいません、親父。うるさくなりそうだ。
Next, I would like to examine Chizaki's relationship to the Yakuza boss, and how he truly seems to care about him, despite all the horrible things he's done to him and his granddaughter. As a child, Chizaki is picked up off the streets and given a home by the boss of the Yakuza, or Pops as Chizaki affectionately calls him. Due to this kindness, Chizaki clings to the boss and is taken on as if he were his son. Unfortunately, Chizaki is not content to simply enjoy the boss as a surrogate father, but feels the need to repay him a life debt. The way Chizaki thinks is mechanical, and his actions towards the boss can easily be misunderstood as entirely selfish. Yet, Chizaki shows actual compassion and, dare I say, love for Pops. One example would be when Chizaki visits Pops at his sickbed and apologizes to him for the noise, something he did not have to do and served no benefit to him. He was simply concerned for his well-being. Another example would be during his explanation of his plan. There are moments where Chizaki looks truly hurt and like he only wants to help. Ultimately, he is denied, and the expression he makes when the boss simply utters his name says it all. He almost looks like he could cry. As we know, Chizaki puts the boss into a coma, promising to revive him once the dirty work is done, but he shows no malice or hatred when doing so. In fact, Overhaul never shows any pleasure from harming or killing others. The only time he seems satisfied is when he takes Lemillion's quirk, but this has more to do with him proving his ideology rather than simply causing pain. Otherwise, he is very cold and matter-of-fact about it. Touching people or being touched makes him physically sick, and Chizaki mentions that he hates using his quirk as it requires getting blood on him. Yet, even though it is clear that Overhaul is uncomfortable and in distress, he is willing to get his hands dirty for the sake of Pops. It's all worth it if he can just make him proud and repay his debt. While Overhaul is without a doubt the most despicable character in MHA, with the context of his relationship to Pops, his much-deserved comeuppance at the hands of the League of Villains begins to take on a much more depressing tone. At first, Overhaul shows no fear for his life, and barely even responds to the pain inflicted on him when Compress takes his arm. Only when his right hand is about to be taken does he react. Now quirkless, he is left strapped to a bed and stripped of his agency. Just like Pops, the man he'll never be able to show the bright future he promised, and whom he can now never revive. Without his quirk, all of Overhaul's terrible actions now have tangible, permanent consequences. And it's this realization that leaves Kai Chizaki with nothing to do but cry out in agony and regret. One of Overhaul's top minions, Nemoto, claims that for things to go as planned, you must cast off your emotions. As warned by the Yakuza boss, Chizaki, in order to fulfill his plan, became a demon without a heart. However, the boss also warns that no one would follow such a person, yet Overhaul has found at least 8 people who are willing to serve him in his twisted goals. The original purpose of the 8 bullets of the Hasaikai seemed to be as a way to give certain heroes, like Kirishima or Sun Eater, a fight that expressed that character's version of MHA's theme of what does it mean to be a hero. Yet, for some reason, Horikoshi was adamant about giving at least one villain from each of these encounters a backstory. For the longest time, I just didn't understand the point of giving them one. It just felt like a cheap way to make us care about villains who were only going to be around for one fight. But then I realized something. Chizaki has the same unhealthy affection for the boss as the 8 bullets do for him. From the ones we interact with, we learn that they were picked up by Overhaul when they were nothing, and then felt the need to repay him for his kindness. The 3 trash bullets mention Overhaul finding them on the streets and giving them purpose, and Nemoto loves Overhaul and would die for him, simply for providing him with human connection he could not get thanks to his quirk. Even Rappa has an attachment to Overhaul via a debt to be paid in a fight, which was cultivated by Chizaki taking advantage of Rappa's simple nature. In a twisted way, Overhaul, whether he realizes it or not, is imitating his relationship with the boss by creating microcosms of his own life with the 8 bullets. From the trash villain's lack of purpose in life, Nemoto's desire for someone who cares for him, and Rappa's need to prove himself, the bullets that Horikoshi decides to focus on are the ways Chizaki probably feels about himself in relation to Pops. In Overhaul's head, of course the 8 bullets would follow him. He saved them, just like how Chizaki feels he owes a life debt to the boss and must repay it to the best of his ability, even if he must do terrible things to accomplish it, and even if it costs him his life. Before we get to our final topic of Overhaul's ideology, and how it all connects to the previously discussed topics, we need to establish where Chizaki first got the idea that quirks are a disease. As a child, Chizaki is seen reading about quirks and how they may have come from rats. The book states that there isn't really any solid proof for this theory, but Chizaki believes it anyway, as it was his first exposure to what quirks were. This theory forms his ideology at a young age, and is only strengthened by his experiences in the Hero Society he has grown up with, and the effect it's had on his life. More on that later. This mindset of quirks as a disease informs Overhaul's intriguing arrogance and disdain he has towards heroes and villains. To him, they are fake and only think that they are special, that they can save anyone they want or take what they want because they have quirks. This connects to his personality that causes him to fixate on whatever he is first exposed to, like quirks being a disease. This can also be seen in Chizaki's manipulation of Eri by convincing her that she is cursed. This idea was not something that Chizaki came up with, but actually from hearing that Eri's mom called her that before she left, implanting the idea in his head. Seeing the destruction that comes from Eri's quirk, something that he already believes are a disease, only validates his convictions that quirks are unnatural, or in Eri's case, cursed.
俺が崩すのはこの世界その構造そのものだ目の前の小さな正義だけの感情論だけのヒーロー気取りが俺の邪魔をするな
Now we come to the truly twisted psyche of Chizaki, that being how Overhaul is simply a persona, a dark embodiment of his two desires, those being to bring the Yakuza back to power and the destruction of Quirk Society, respectively. Let's look at the evidence for this alternate persona and how both goals come together. When some of Overhaul's men are captured, they mention how he took on the exact opposite values of the old boss, like working with villains and taking on villain names. You might think this is just Chizaki's nature. He wanted to become the new King of Darkness and to destroy quirks, right? If we look at the story, there isn't a single time where Overhaul mentions the boss or bringing back the Yakuza to Shigaraki or the heroes. He only talks about breaking the foundations of the world. Heroes like All Might have led the charge to destroy all organized crime and have shrunk the Yakuza to near obscurity. A society built on quirks has destroyed Chizaki's world and hurt the one person he truly cares about through means that he believes are unnatural and undeserved. When combined with his own germophobia, it's no wonder Chizaki hates quirks and sees their influence as confirmation that it creates a diseased way of thinking. Quirks are a never-ending infection on his life that is slowly killing Pops in the Yakuza. Many wonder how Overhaul could want to destroy all quirks with the quirk erasing bullets, but also be willing to sell a cure back to the heroes that would restore their powers. But that's the thing. Overhaul doesn't want to destroy all quirks, he wants the power to destroy all quirks, and to use said power as leverage over the entire globe. A worldwide quarantine where Overhaul can safely profit off the contaminated and their diseased thinking. Over and over again, Overhaul talks about hero syndrome, this belief that having a quirk makes you special, makes you believe you can become something greater. A mindset that turns schoolboys into thinking they are heroes, and a group of grown men with nothing better to do into thinking they are villains. With both heroes and villains being catered to, Overhaul can profit off this endless war that his drugs will create. Countless heroes will die after being effectively disarmed by a quirk erasing bullet, right before either being eliminated by an enemy quirk or firearm. And if what Overhaul believes is true, many will give up on their dreams of becoming a hero if they fear their quirk could be taken. A serum is just there to satiate those so infected that they will happily chase their dreams until it kills them. In this way, Overhaul's ambitions and goals are analogous to his quirk, destroying society to recreating it. All with the goal of once again putting the sacred title of the Yakuza above those fake heroes and villains that once plagued them. However, Chizaki isn't so delusional as to think the boss would approve of what he's doing to Eri, the Yakuza members, or even those manipulated into becoming the 8 Bullets. So for the greater good of the Shiei Saikai, Overhaul becomes something dark and distant from his old self. During Overhaul's final battle with Deku and Eri, we see flashbacks of his goal to help the boss, and we get this line: "If all goes according to plan and we make it big, I'll bring it all back." In another translation, he says he'll restore it all, which is the second part of his quirk, to destroy and restore. Chizaki doesn't want to end as Overhaul, that's just the nasty, painful part that must precede the healing when the Yakuza are back in power and the boss can be in charge again. Chizaki was only hurting people before by getting into brawls, but Overhaul can kill. Chizaki wants to help the boss, but Overhaul wants to change the world. There's tons of proof of this new persona that is separate from his original self, like how he tells Mirio he has abandoned the name Chizaki and becomes furious as he continues to refer to him as such. We can also see a transition from Kai Chizaki, who wears a normal mask and no gloves, to Overhaul, who has a more bombastic outfit, a plague mask, and a villain name. To preserve the past, Chizaki must, for a time, engage with the present. And finally, we come to the biggest piece of evidence for the split persona, in that Chizaki only became a villain out of necessity. Here's the setup. After being defeated by Deku and Eri, Chizaki is actually the one who gains a power of love boost. While writhing in filth, blood, and breaking out into hives as he screams in agony, Chizaki remembers an important moment in his life. A moment that probably plays in his head over and over and over again. The praise he received as a boy from Pops, after getting into a fight for protecting the honor of the Yakuza. But what was he protecting them from? From being called villains. What's interesting about this flashback is that the boss at first tells Chizaki that he shouldn't have done what he did, that it's not right to hurt innocent people. But then he adds, "You shouldn't have done it, but Chizaki, thank you for protecting our honor." This one moment is the foundation from which Chizaki lives his life, and this conflicting message of rebuke for doing something dishonorable, but praise for his intentions, has over time been taken to its most cold, yet logical extremes. To Chizaki, it is not him who is at fault for what he has done, but those diseased heroes attempting to enforce their will upon the boss, leaving him with no choice but to set things right on his own. As Overhaul says, a fake hero is just mere sentimentalism given power, strength given to those who think their emotions are important. The anime visualizes this perfectly, with Midoriya looking like an angry god ready to destroy Overhaul and everything he's worked to achieve. To Kai Chizaki, this is heroism. Author Kohei Horikoshi does this kind of writing all the time. He gives you depth at a much later point in the story that makes you rethink everything you knew about a simple character. Take, for example, Kirishima. His backstory doesn't really develop him as much as it recontextualizes everything you've seen before. In the moment, you just see the surface level of his character, but once everything is in place, it creates a better experience looking back. The writing for Overhaul is the same. As stated before, most of the actions and words of Overhaul didn't connect with me on first viewing. A pretty huge one was that I just couldn't understand Chizaki's insistence on helping the boss when repeatedly told by him that he did not want it. But this one moment with Chizaki was the first time I felt I understood both the reason and the foundation of Overhaul's character. And it's incredibly chilling to see the difference between a young Chizaki standing up for his father's honor to the snarling demon he has become, all during his final act of resistance against a world that has clearly outgrown him.
これでお前は無力非力の無個性マン。お前が費やしてきた努力はさ、俺のもんになっちゃったよ。次は俺たちだ。
If you would like to watch more amazing videos, you won't find them here. However, you can find them on the editor of this video's channel called Kor. That's K-O-R. He does great analysis videos on anime that are both interesting to listen to and watch. If you're looking for more My Hero Academia content, then I would suggest his video called Empathy Through Aesthetic, which goes over how a character's design can instantly allow you to connect with them before they even say a word, with MAJ being used as one of the big three examples. It's how I found his channel, and the interesting perspective along with the really good editing makes it one of my favorite videos to this day. Check it out and show him some love. Links on screen and in the description.